Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, it's Cass. Today I want to have a chat about masking fluid. So first of all, what is masking fluid? Masking fluid is a liquid latex that is painted onto paper or another support, essentially to preserve white space. The latex stops the paint or the ink or whatever medium you're using from reaching the paper in that place, and so then when your paint is dry, you can just rub off that masking fluid and that paper is untainted. I admit, I only just recently started using masking fluid, but after much reflection and art making in the last few weeks, I really have decided that it does have an important part in our artwork, or it can have an important part in our artwork if we use it well. I can say that I used to look at masking fluid as a little bit of a cheater's tool. That if you couldn't preserve your whites with hard work alone, they weren't worth preserving. And in a sense, I still kind of feel that way, in that if you rely too heavily on something like masking fluid, it will slow your growth as an artist because you're no longer as attentive if you're just masking everything. You don't have to be careful about it. So if you find that a complex composition is difficult to achieve without the use of a masking aid, you may want to work on that preservation alone before going back to your masking fluid. That being said, I really like it for some things and couldn't get away with a few without it, and here's why. I've made a few videos on alcohol inks, and you may have seen that I did a product review on narrow paper. The cool thing about narrow paper is its erasability, meaning that you can paint with alcohol inks on it and then simply erase them away with alcohol to add other elements. However, if you are only using this technique, you are limiting yourself and wasting precious ink, which, in case you hadn't noticed, is very expensive. So instead of just using a lifting technique, use your masking fluid. For example, if you want to paint this pint of beer, is it logical to paint the whole background and then erase with alcohol the glass? No, it's an incredible waste of ink. Instead, block your glass with masking fluid, paint your background however you want, and then remove your masking fluid, paint your glass, and use a lifting technique to establish the details in the glass. Masking fluid is very useful for, and possibly most commonly associated with, watercolor painting. Now, anyone who enjoys watercolor painting is at least a little bit obsessed with preserving their highlights. With masking fluid's help, you can go wild with wet and wet backgrounds without worrying about messing up your subject. So today, while we chat about this, I'm going to be working on a watercolor drawing of a lily for my garden. First, I'm going to draw the lily and then mask it. I want my background to be very dark, and I want to work wet and wet so the background looks softly blended and muted, using both India ink and watercolor paint. So the masking fluid is going to protect the center of my paper where the lily is going to go, and I can let go with the wet and wet media in the background. One thing to make a note of is that whether you're using watercolors or alcohol inks, make sure your masking fluid is totally dry before you paint around it, or especially before you try to remove it. It works like a charm, but it does require time, so it can do its best work. So plan ahead. Mask your drawing long before you want to paint, or you may find yourself painting over and around tacky masking fluid, or trying to remove masking fluid wet with alcohol ink or watercolor paint, and consequently making a huge mess of an originally beautiful drawing or painting. And in a minute here, I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. Once the background's all done, and I'm satisfied with the depth of color, I'm going to go back and start peeling back my masking fluid. I'm going to start removing one section early. I'm going to show you exactly what it looks like. And then you're going to see why you really shouldn't do that. So I'm going to start rolling back the masking fluid so you see what it looks like. Now the purple section to the right of this flower petal is still pretty wet. So as I start taking off the masking fluid there, you see that it starts to get all smudgy around the edge of the flower petal where the paint was not dry.
Yes, the masking fluid does come off, and no, it's not the end of the world. But after it all comes off, you can definitely see that it's the least beautiful part of my drawing. When I take the masking fluid off, I tend to just roll it off with my finger like this. I know that there are tools you can use to push the dried masking fluid off, but honestly, because it sticks to itself, I find that it's easiest to just roll it up like this and adhere it to itself. You see that the areas where the paint had dried properly, the masking fluid edge is much cleaner and more beautiful. You can also see many places that I went over my outline with my masking fluid. You gotta be careful with this because although it's not the end of the world, it can mess up your drawing a little bit. Had I wanted to create like a perfectly clean, beautiful, professional drawing of a lily here, I would have messed up all my edges in having surpassed my outline with my masking fluid. So the lesson here is when you mask, mask accurately. If your drawing is worth masking, it's worth doing well. So make sure you go just to the very edge of your drawing and not beyond if you want that to look nice and clean and beautiful. You can see here that after taking the masking fluid off of the flower, I remasked the center of the flower where the stamens are so that I can work wet and wet without disturbing those stamens. The center of the flower is going to be nice and bright and yellow, but my flower is going to be very vibrant red. So I don't want those colors to conflict together. Now, the accuracy of your masking leads me into my next point, which is the brush that you're going to use. A little bit of thought should go into which brushes you will want to mask with. And that is because you want to mask accurately, like I said, so you want a brush that does a pretty good job. If you were using an old and ratty brush that wants to go everywhere and its bristles are not uniform, then you might have a tough time staying in the lines, as it were. For this reason, you want to choose a brush that is going to do the job it needs to. However, that being said, do not use your favorite brush or even a brush that is very near and dear to your heart, and here's why. Masking fluid is really tough on brushes. Remember me saying that masking fluid was just effectively a liquid latex? Well, just dipping any old brush into that multiple times is not easy on those brushes. It is not easy to clean out well, and the brush does not recover happily from it. So because of that, you want to choose a brush that is not your favorite fine-tuning brush for everyday work. You want something that will do the job, but it's not going to break your heart if that brush gets sacrificed for masking fluid. So the moral of the story, choose a brush that you don't love too much, but still can make an accurate line. And here is how you use it. Before you start masking, take your masking brush, wet it, and put a little bit of dish soap in it. Just rub the dish soap into the bristles and dab it off with your fingers. Then dip it directly in your masking fluid and mask like that. I know it sounds crazy and you feel like the soap is going to mix with the masking fluid, but it sincerely does not. It simply coats those bristles nicely so that the latex can just slide right off after. And while the masking fluid is still tough on your brush, it will not do nearly as much damage as it would without the soap. Try it, you'll like it. Another point I want to bring up with masking fluid is its tint. There are oodles of different kinds of masking fluid out there, and not all of them are tinted, but most of them are, and that is awesome. And if you buy a masking fluid, choose one that is tinted. You can see that the masking fluid I'm using now has a blue tint. It is not darkly colored, but it is enough to show where you have masked. And I tell you, that makes a huge difference. Some of them are tinted yellow, some of them are tinted blue, some of them are tinted green, but choose any one with any kind of tint, and it will help you a lot. So here you can see I'm just removing the masking fluid from the stamens from the middle, and I've got a nice clean area to paint my stamens in that my yellow is not going to get all sullied up with my red, and everything's going to look really nice. You can see that the latex really does stick to itself. So if you have a little bit of the masking fluid that's stubborn and doesn't want to come off, just rub it with another little bit of masking fluid that you've already taken off, and it will help to dislodge it. Now, before we get to the end of this little video, I want to talk about corrections, because nobody's perfect, especially not me. And I always find that there are things that I want to touch up and corrections that I want to make before I feel like my painting is actually done. especially in this one because I did not pay as much attention as I ordinarily would have because I kind of wanted to show a first time result. So I can show what it looks like when you go over your lines with your masking fluid, so I can show how I make my corrections. And if you guys have watched any of my other painting videos, you'll know that I really, really enjoy both white gouache and black India ink for doing my touch-ups. If you have messed up your beautiful white outline around the edge of your lily by surpassing your outline with your masking fluid, you can make that a little less visible with a touch of white gouache. You can also use black India ink to outline your work to cover up any outlined areas that might look less clean than you'd like them to. Is this cheating? Sure, but your drawing will look really nice, and it means that you don't have to redo it. Our art is not about having a nice painting, it's about painting something that makes us happy, right? So instead of scrapping the drawing you've been working on because you made an error on it, go ahead and adapt and fine-tune a little, add an outline, touch up with some white gouache, let yourself go. Sure, you can make a beautiful painting without these cheats and feel even more accomplished, but you don't absolutely have to, and this will certainly make your painting more varied and give you a little bit more options, especially when you screw up. I haven't shown in the video the use of the white gouache, I just put it right on there, but here is what the India ink that I'm putting over top of it looks like. I want to have a nice, lovely, dramatic black outline, but I don't want it to look too uniform, so I'm not using a pen or a marker or anything. I'm just using my trusty brush and my India ink. Does it look perfect? No. Do I like my painting? Absolutely. And at the end of the day, that's what's important. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video about masking fluid. I hope it encouraged you to try it. I encourage you all to think outside the box when it comes to this tool. Sure, it's a cheater's tool, but it's also an awesome artist's tool, and I think we should all use it sometimes. Don't get stuck in a profile as to how to use it, when to use it. Think big. Use it to mask a huge area so that you can go wild with wet and wet in a small area next to it. Use it to mask teeny tiny little highlights so you have little bright white highlights wherever you want them to be. It's your world. It's up to you to make it beautiful. Use those tools to your advantage. Well guys, I had a ton of fun talking about masking fluid today. I hope you guys learned something and that you enjoyed it. If you do, please subscribe to my channel so you don't miss a video. I'll see you all next time.